Blake right out of the gate is like, hey man, you want to see my financial statement, my retirement statement? I'm like, whoa, hey, like, I mean, kind of, but you don't have to show me that.
Yeah.
But there's this willingness here and transparency to say, this is what this company can do for you, and this is what this situation can do for you if you and the rest of the team all pull together. And I am so proud of this. There's just an openness here of people to talk about their financial situation that you can't find other places for many reasons and many good reasons, but you kind of have to have that transparency if you do want to show people the true story of what you're working toward.
Dan McGowan, welcome to Empowered Owners.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So I think there's a ton of ways we could take this conversation, a lot of different angles and things we'll definitely, I'm sure, try to cover. But the first thing I want to ask you is kind of a little bit, off to the side maybe, but, I think is going to help people get to know you really quickly a little bit here. So your LinkedIn, you have a background picture on your LinkedIn profile, and it's of you surrounded by a bunch of people wearing helmets. What is that background picture, Dan?
Well, that is from a huddle of a roller derby team that I've coached in the past. That was Team Indiana. That was, I specifically, I believe the picture might have been one of our first bouts ever as a team, but it was an all-star team formed of Indiana roller derby skaters. And I've been involved in that sport for going on 16 years now, maybe more. Started as a volunteer, became an announcer, and became a coach. And it's one of the most challenging, rewarding, eye-opening. It checks every box for me. Competitive, everything about it was wonderful. The community's great.
That's awesome. And I know we're not going to spend a lot of time on that topic in particular, but we have to spend a little bit more on that. So it's roller derby, and it's women's roller derby, right, Dan?
It is I'm involved. The teams I'm involved in are gender inclusive, but it's a women's organization generally. The sport kind of had a resurgence about 20 years ago, and they now play on the flat track. So the stuff you may be used to of elbowing and dropping off of like a bank track thing, that still kind of exists, but it's this much of the sport. Now it's a more global sport. There's, top of memory, something like 1,200 teams globally that play this flat track version of it. And I've been involved on that side of things for, like I said, probably 16, 17 years. Started, Indianapolis has 4 teams, plus Team Indiana that I mentioned earlier is based here. One of the teams I coached, the Corn-Fed Roller Derby team, they're in Muncie, Indiana, which is about an hour north of Indy. Go Corn-Fed. They're great. And it's a sport where I'm not going to say no professionals. I don't believe there are any professionals in it. There's people that get some endorsement deals and such. There's no money to be made in it. It's a pure passion sport that is built by volunteers and driven by these incredible athletes that also have day jobs. So you get all walks of life in the sport. Incredibly empowering group of people that everybody learns from everybody. So there's no real playbook for how to run the sport. Even 16, 17 years that I've been involved in it. The teams are driven by the skaters, driven by the volunteers, and it's fantastic.
That's awesome. I really want to spend the next 20 minutes just talking about that, but I think we'll cover some other things, but it might come back to that. We'll see.
All right.
So why don't you give us a few minutes on just who you are, Dan? Obviously people will know you work for TVF. Your title's content manager, but like a little bit more about who you are, where you grew up, like whatever you want to share, just to kind of tell people a little bit about who you are.
Sure. I could tee it up with kind of what got me. I could work backward from what got me here. Handling content is a heck of a lot like media production, which was sort of where I got started in college, and even a little bit in high school. I was kind of interested in that stuff. Sixth grade, my brother and I sat at the dining room table writing the old, like, what do you want to be when you grow up thing. And we were both at kind of an impasse. I have a twin brother, and we both have a lot of the same interests. And it was Sunday evening, probably last minute kind of thing. We didn't tell our mom that we had anything to do until then. And she's like, well, trying to reason through, like, what do you like? What direction would you want? And we kind of landed on sports announcer. We both were huge baseball fans, played sports growing up, and loved listening to the Cincinnati Reds on the radio. Happened to live near the announcer of the Reds, longtime announcer, Marty Brenneman. Loved his style and everything about that. Got to meet him a few times. And we sort of took that all the way through from sixth grade on. It was like, all right, that's a pretty good direction to go. Went to Ball State University, which has a great sports broadcasting program. My brother sort of diverged from that. He ended up going into teaching. He's an English chair at Warren Central High School in Indianapolis, which is, I admire the heck out of the dude. He's doing awesome work over there and has for a long time. And then I kind of stayed on the broadcasting path in college. Got out of college, no job yet, but the idea was, I don't know, maybe I'm going to hook onto some small market and do sports broadcasting. That didn't take, but I ended up working at a radio station in Indianapolis that did sports news and talk, and blended all those things that I've learned along the way to become a producer for their morning show and then the afternoon shows for a while. So, 7 or 8 years I did sports talk radio and news talk radio, various aspects of that. Did a little bit of television production in there as well, and then moved into the PR and marketing thing. Most broadcast careers have a coda to them, and whether it be the hours, the low pay. I'm not shining a huge negative light, I guess, and too much, because it was a lot of fun and the skills in it are amazing. The people you meet are amazing. It's just not always a sustainable lifestyle for everybody. So moved into communications, marketing, and media relations. Worked at a trade organization for a little while. Worked then at an organization that manufactured acoustic products. Like you see, I've got a little piece of it here, stuff you would see in a studio, for example. And then, through a connection, who turned out to be my boss, she let me onto a job that was open. I recommended a bunch of other people, and then my job situation sort of changed, and I'm like, could I apply for this too? She's like, yes, please do. So, matter of weeks, then it all worked out, and I ended up at TVF, and 3 years now for me, almost on the nose as we're talking.
That's amazing. So did you got into kind of the world you wanted to get into, from dreaming about it with your twin brother, the world of broadcast and all those types of things. Is there part of you that's, gosh, it's sad that you had to move on from that ultimately? Or how do you feel about that twist in your career path?
Yes and no, because I've still been able to dabble. We talked about the roller derby stuff earlier. I've been able to quench that kind of play-by-play analysis sort of side of me through that sport. I've done some local high school football and basketball games as well. So I've been able to dabble, which is wonderful. The specific things I do with my job actually are super in line with it. It's all about storytelling, and that's good broadcasting is good storytelling. Good content. My job's content manager. Good content is good storytelling, and it's writing, it's audio editing, it's podcasting. We began a podcast here a couple of years ago with Lori Atone, my partner. We do the Textile Nerd podcast, and it's really starting to get some legs. Audio only. And it's kind of geared toward exactly what it's named. It's geared toward the geeky side of fabric and textiles, and any real curiosity we have, we turn it into a show, which scratches all those creative itches. We're both incredibly curious, willing to learn people, and we extend that into the show and have people that are incredibly knowledgeable, but also incredibly generous with their time and incredibly thoughtful about the industry. So I get to scratch every itch, I think, communications wise, broadcasting wise through work, but also get some little, some side gigs along the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And your podcast is fantastic. Obviously I'm a listener, and you guys do a great job. Textiles it's a pretty, it's a niche. Not everybody out there necessarily thinks about textiles on a day-to-day basis, but I think textiles is a really interesting topic because they're literally everywhere. When you stop and start noticing, like they're in everything almost. Is that something that for you've experienced too, as you've come to TVF and gotten involved in the textile industry?
Sure. And Chris, you can relate to this a little bit too, where your initial training wasn't in textiles at all.
For sure.
And a lot of the folks around us, it's an absolute lifestyle for people. And to be able to now plug into that myself is incredibly exciting, but it's at first a little daunting because textiles goes back to ancient, I'm going to pluck some plants away, weave them together, and that's a textile, and that's a basket that's holding me together, whatever it is. So it's an old field, but there's so much innovation in it, and there's so much passion in it, and there's so much learning to do that even those of us, or those around us that have been in it forever, seemingly, they're constantly learning and they're constantly innovating. So being able to tap into that part of it where you're talking to people that have seemingly been everywhere and done everything, but it doesn't matter because they're going to continue to learn. They're going to continue to grow the field. And they're so generous with giving back the knowledge because they understand how people-centric textiles is. And physically it's everywhere, but also in terms of people, it's everywhere. The amount of hands that touch any given piece of finished textile fabric or woven material or substrate that you see has been through dozens upon dozens of people along the way in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool. So yeah, I'd encourage everybody to, if they want to go deeper on textiles and start nerding out on textiles, check out the Textile Nerd podcast. I think the other thing that, if I had to guess, that might have been new for you, Dan, at TVF, other than textiles, was employee ownership. So I'm curious if you've had any prior experience before TVF with working for an employee-owned company.
I'm glad you asked. And no, in fact, I had no experience with employee ownership. In fact, hearing the word ESOP was gibberish to me, to be honest. However, once I understood that, and my boss, Desiree Friedman, who was the one who she sort of let me on to the job that was open that I eventually got and still do here. She told me right away, she's like, I'm telling you, this is different, and in the best ways possible. We had worked together at a different place in the nonprofit sector, and she had just from the get-go had such a positive impression of employee ownership that she sort of, in the few months she had even worked here, was evangelizing it already for me. And all of the promise and thoughts about it have come to fruition. There's a sort of team-mindedness that you get here through the ESOP that bonds everybody together that you can't get anywhere else. This sort of collective idea that what we do impacts other people, but impacts the entire business. It puts such a fine employee ownership puts such a fine point on that real driving force of what we do. You really can't get it anywhere else. And the thing that that absolutely you can't get anywhere else is that share value that you build as a team, and that at the end of your retirement, you now have this pot of gold that you're watching grow all along the way. And when it's all said and done, you have this unique opportunity to set yourself up financially later in life in a way that you cannot find anywhere else.
That's really cool. When you first took the role and you heard about ESOP, how big of a factor was it? Or was it more like, oh, that's interesting, I'm not sure what to make of that, but like, I want to take this role for other reasons?
I'll be honest, I would say, if I cut everything into a pie about the decision I was making at the time, because I was already employed, I would have been leaving a job. I would say that it was 50% of the decision, because at that point, specifically that point in time, the idea of having a stake in the company and having a stake in the future and being able to help both of those parts of it was so appealing, because the situation I was leaving, it was one sort of sole ownership situation, and that didn't go well. It really was, making the company perform significantly worse because of the control of one person. So having this ownership idea where everybody feels drawn in and literally invested in the company, and able to make make their financial futures better, but also make their day-to-day better by just working better together because you have a goal in mind, was so appealing to me that like I jumped. Like the second I got the email back from Des when I said, "Hey, would it make sense if I applied here?" And she said yes. I'm like, "Here you go, let's do this. I'm all in on this." It made a massive difference.
That's amazing. In your first couple years, are there any moments that come to mind? Any like you were already kind of hoping and expecting this would be, a really different kind of place to work? Anything in the first couple years that stands out as like, wow, this really, there's like proof is in the pudding kind of a thing? Anything come to mind?
The first one that comes to mind for me is my colleague Blake, and Blake's been a guest on this podcast and has an incredible story himself, where he started working in our warehouse and built himself up through those roles and ended up changing to sales. And Blake's now doing incredible in sales. So there's these growth opportunities. So just knowing Blake's opportunities at that point felt different to me too, where jobs aren't siloed, where and that seemed incredibly appealing from previous places that I worked, where you're sort of on your track and that's it. So Blake right out of the gate is like, "Hey man, you want to see my financial statement, my retirement statement?" I'm like, whoa, hey, wait. Like, I mean, kind of, but you don't have to show me that.
Yeah.
But there's this willingness here and transparency to say, "Hey, I have made this is what this company can do for you, and this is what this situation can do for you if you and the rest of the team all pull together. And I am so proud of this. Look at it, please do." And there's just an openness here of people to talk about their financial situation that you don't get. You can't find other places for many reasons and many good reasons, but you kind of have to have that transparency if you do want to show people the true story of what you're working toward. You can talk ethereal all you want about, well, you're going to get some additional money when you retire. Like, okay, that's cool. But if you have people that are like, not only is it nice, is this financial situation you're going to retire with very nice, because it is, but I'm going to show you because I, beat my chest a little bit about how impressive it is.
What do you think some of the benefits are to people that join an employee-owned company that's successful and starts to have that impact for folks when they can start to feel like their retirement is kind of maybe possible in a way that it wasn't before, or other things might be possible in their life? Or are there other benefits too that come to mind for you for people that work for employee-owned companies?
Well, if we'll stay kind of on that end of the rainbow sort of retirement track,
Sure.
one of the duties that I perform here is every month we write profiles about one of our employees, and for me, it's a great opportunity to just get to meet people because that's one of my favorite things in the world. But then you get to share that story with the rest of the company. We share it online, and it's neat to see that. But another thing I do is I'll write a profile about our retirees. And at TVF, we've had a couple in the last few years who have had incredibly long and storied careers here, which is a little intimidating as a new guy in a way. But it's also invigorating that people will stay here for, 30, 25 plus years, 30 plus years, 35, 40, almost 40 years for people. It's unheard of in current times. But that's one of the old school things that my dad was a mailman for 43 years. And that's that you do that by job security, by passion, and by pride in what you do, and just hard work, but also some opportunities to do it. You got to love where you are. And that, to me, that was the first thing I noticed, was that people love not just what they do, and they're not just getting by. They love where they are, and they love who they work with, and they love supporting each other. So getting to interview those people as they're retiring, it makes me even more hopeful because, Chris, you like to talk about life-changing outcomes for people. And nothing is more life-changing than, as you're retiring, looking back on your career, seeing all the successes and all the everything you've poured into your company, but then being able to walk away and say, all that time I've also been earning this additional financial opportunity, and it's real money. And everybody that I've talked with that retires, they if they don't directly use the word like dignity, they sort of peck around that word, but it's like there's this dignity that you now have that, like, when you retire, we're out of the era of pensions. Like those rarely exist anymore. Certainly for my generation, I wish they were around, but they're just not anymore for companies. So you don't have that golden egg anymore that people work toward and can always look toward. But when you're in employee ownership and you're in an ESOP, you have those shares that you're accumulating throughout the years, and you really do have that pot at the end of the rainbow. And it's real. I mean, the folks that have retired have been very satisfied, and spoke glowingly about what it's going to do for their lives now that they're not punching the clock anymore.
Do you think that's kind of a relief for folks to hear that this is happening and has happened now for some of the former TVFers?
I think it is. And I mean, I can mainly speak for myself, but I would say for me, absolutely it's a relief, because not to say that my family doesn't think about finances or anything like that, but it's like, we're not, like I said, my dad was a mailman. My mom worked as a health aide at an elementary school for 20, I think she was in there for 25 years or so. The hardest work, we could do a whole podcast of me just bragging about my parents, because I love them so much, and all the lessons they taught me about hard work and about how to be a team player, whether they directly said it or not. I just watched them and grew up just admiring the heck out of my parents, and I still do. But one thing that we didn't really talk much about is finances, because it just I don't know. I don't know why that is, and it's just some people don't.
I think that's a common thing. Most Americans don't grow up really talking about finances in depth, budgeting, etc. I mean, it's not a common thing. I don't think so. I don't think your experience is that unique, unfortunately.
Right. And especially the longer term of it is what you do when you retire, because theoretically, by the time I retire, they're not going to be with us. So it's like, it's just not a thing that comes up. Um, and in their cases, both of them had pensions to look forward to through their hard work. And, in my dad's case, he really fought hard for that. He was part of some movements in the 70s that really that helped draw those benefits out of his employer and create that for other people. So for me to come to a place where, previously my employers, it was like, well, you get into a 401k and we may throw a percentage of money also on top of that. Maybe that percentage is going to go down over time. And, having no financial background myself or even know how to talk about it, that it's so abstract to me. And I barely have any handle on what my full financial future is or pot thereof would be. And then I get here and you have somebody like Blake who's like, oh yeah, come on, look at what I made. All right, dude. Like, oh, it's shocking, but in a good way. It's this transparency that immediately hits you, and you're like, you can now think about it. Whereas I was almost in avoidant territory about like, well, we'll figure that out when I get there because I don't know if I'm going to have any retirement or whatever 401k money I have. Maybe it'll grow, maybe it won't. I'm not looking at it, so here we are. But because the rewards, as everybody will tell you here, the rewards are quite nice when you retire. Now I've looked more into it. I'm now trying to take a little bit more command of my future. I'm trying to see what that may look like and see now realistically, is it a thing where am I going to have to work till I get dragged out of the place, or am I going to be able to retire in a healthy, comfortable spot sooner than I could have ever anticipated? And I think so far the latter seems overwhelmingly like it's going to be the outcome.
That's awesome, Dan. Anything in your few years here at TVF, and it's crazy it's only been a few years because you're such a phenomenal advocate for, employee ownership and your positivity and, even for textiles, like it seems like you've been with the company for a lot longer. So in a great way. So I just want to thank you for your advocacy, for everything that's going on at TVF, employee ownership, textiles, and otherwise. But like, what do you summarize as like key ingredients to so far, like in your experience, like a successful ownership culture or whatever, like, that employee ownership mindset, culture, et cetera, that can take hold in a lot of employee owned companies? What do you think some of the ingredients are of that?
I think you can relate to this too. I guess I could draw kind of like sports metaphors for it. And it's, if you look at the teams that are built to last, they're not built overnight. And they're also not built by like one person. They're built by the team contributing. And it means, in basketball terms, all right, let's bring up the Indiana Pacers, for example. Is that
great
okay?
example? I love the example.
Are you more through your mourning period with what happened in Game 7?
It's so sad. It was rough, but what a ride! I mean, what an incredible, fun ride up until that moment.
Yeah. The Indiana Pacers this season made an historic run that ended in, frankly, in the sports world, ended in tragedy, where their star player got injured, it tore his Achilles tendon, shooting
Game 7 of the finals, which is just wild.
And he was having a whale of a game until that moment, and they looked like the Pacers looked like they were very well going to pull this one off. Yeah. So taking that team, and you look at a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, who was their star, MVP candidate, all-star. This guy is the envy of the league because of his shooting ability, but also his distribution ability. This dude can work the ball around. Yeah, work the ball around literally, but also he works the ball around with the teammates. If he's not having a good game, he's going to dish it. And he's still drawing that attention because of how much skill he has. The other team's still playing defense on him just as hard as they would if he's shooting, 70% from 3-point that night. But if he doesn't have it, he's dishing to the open guy because he's still probably drawing double coverage and he's still got somebody open. He realizes that. I remember in the playoffs, almost every game, it was one other player who rarely played throughout the season coming in and giving them impactful minutes. A guy named Thomas Bryant came in a couple of times, and I always enjoyed watching Thomas Bryant because sometimes the guy goofed up. We're all human. Sometimes he missed an assignment on defense or something. He'd go to the sideline and you'd see him kind of get dressed down by the coach. It happens in every high-level sport. But he kept with it, and in the playoffs, he shined. I mean, he barely got any playing time throughout the season. There were 2 games down the stretch where he took over for some time and really became this, outside threat. He made some great defensive plays, which he's not necessarily known for. But translating that now into like the employee ownership world, you have to have everybody stepping up and doing things. And whether or not you're like the CEO or president or, whatever really highfalutin title you have opportunities to step up and people kind of, they hit their shot. They will take the opportunities. And because ownership mindset sort of imbued in all of us from the time we get go. We just talk about things differently around here. We're constantly talking about the idea that we are owners. We call each other employee owners. We don't call each other, whatever a title is typically. Like we almost always kind of lead with we're employee owners. So that just the concept of constantly talking about it even changes your perspective and makes you understand that your role isn't just to affect your team. Your role is to affect the entire company. And in our case, because we have Empowered Ventures, we have other companies also that we're also supporting. So it's this entire ecosystem of support and of individual responsibility and accountability that we understand goes bigger. It goes way bigger than just our lane every time.
Amazingly said, Dan. This has been a lot of fun. We're going to resurrect as we close out here an old segment.
Yes.
That we did in some of the early podcasts when we got Empowered Owners going. It's kind of a draft or a Mount Rushmore type thing. And you're prepared, Dan. Obviously, people know now you're into sports, especially Indiana sports. You've got a lot of opinions on sports. So you're a great guy to basically educate all of us on Indiana women's sports. And we thought it'd be fun for you to come and share your Mount Rushmore, Dan McGowan's Mount Rushmore for Indiana Indiana athletes in women's sports. So hit us with it, Dan, and relatively quickly. I'm going to ask.
All right. Well, thank you for indulging me for one. This is great. So number one, I have to go. And number one and number two, because we're in Indiana, basketball is still the best here. I'm going with 2 Indiana basketball players right out of the gate. Tamika Catchings, who played for the Fever, helped Indy get its second ever pro sports championship. That was in 2011. And she was also the league MVP that year, but also is a pillar of the community. She has a foundation that still gives back to kids. There's a backpack drive every year. And Tamika Catchings is the absolute embodiment. Like she's number one. She's what George Washington's position is on Mount Rushmore. The biggest head. I'm not saying you have a big head, Tamika, but like you would have the biggest head of all these athletes, all the other 3. So Tamika Catchings for me is number one. Number 2 is Caitlin Clark and all the headlines that she's grabbing right now. What a blessing it is to have her in our city. Right now showing up and in this state. Then the third one I would say is I'm going to dip into the roller derby world here. Melissa Will Smith, who used to be known as Maiden America for the Naptown roller derby team, also played on Team Indiana, still playing. I think it's their 15th season in the sport. And Will Smith is one of my heroes as a human being, but also as a skater. Everybody in the state looks up to Will Smith, all-time leading scorer among jammers in the entire state. So Will Smith / formerly known as Maiden America. That's number 3. Number 4, going with Dottie Schroeder. And if you've ever seen the movie A League of Their Own,
Cool.
Dottie Henson is loosely based off of Dottie Schroeder, who's a real person, played in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League after World War II, was a star shortstop for two Indiana-based teams, and was just like super scrappy, stole a bunch of bases, wasn't the best hitter necessarily, but a Cubs GM at one point said that if I'm using kind of diminutive terms here, but if you were a boy, I would pay you $45,000. Like,
Sure.
time
Yeah.
was in 1945, I would give you a big paycheck. So I'm going Tamika Catchings, Caitlin Clark, Melissa Will Smith, and Dottie Schroeder on the Mount Rushmore of Indiana women's sports.
I love it, Dan. I think one person who might be the most famous that might come to mind for Indiana, in my opinion, would be Danica Patrick, but she's an Illinois native, apparently. So
True.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd put her on there.
But man, her her meal ticket was punched in at Indianapolis at the Indy 500, and still has the highest finish for a woman in Indianapolis 500 history. She's definitely an honorable mention, I would say, on my list.
Very good. Dan, this has been so fun. Appreciate it. I'm sure it'd be fun to do this again sometime.
Agreed, Chris. Thank you for the time. It's an honor to be here. It really is.
Thanks, Dan.